Oftentimes we come to an intersection. The first path may stay low. Its tread is wide and flat. Debris has been cleared, and the end is within sight. It looks like a pleasant route. The second path goes high. Its tread is barely visible in the crumbling rock. There is no protection from the elements, and trail signs have ignored it entirely. But somewhere off in the distance is a mountain peak, with 100-mile views in every direction. It was becoming apparent to me that most people will end up taking the first path for its security. So I decided that it was time to introduce some unpredictability into my life. With my hiking experience limited to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, I chose a thru hike with more unpredictability than any other thru hike, the Pacific Northwest Trail. Because even though the low route offered a clear path, I couldn't stop thinking about those 100-mile views. The Pacific Northwest Trail was first conceived of by Ron Strickland in the early 1970s. It took nearly 40 years of cutting trail and raising money to acquire land, but in 2009, the PNT was officially designated a National Scenic Trail. The 1,200-mile-long route connects the Continental Divide to the Pacific Ocean, passing through 3 states, 3 national parks, and 7 national forests. The physical trail is far from complete, though. It is an evolving patchwork of primary and alternate routes for each hiker to choose his or her own path. Unexpectedly, I'm starting with a group of 4 others: Spaceman Spiff, Marathon, Fitty Shrimp, and Matt. Like me, he doesn't have a trail name yet. Even though I've never hiked in the mountains before, this is all strangely familiar to me. My mind has adapted to this new lifestyle almost instantly, but my body will take some time to adjust. First town stop, in the tiny outpost of Pole Bridge, Montana. We had to stay an extra day, because Friday is pizza night at the Northern Lights Saloon. Oh, I've gotten a trail name too. Money Shot.
You don't own a trail name until the first time you introduce yourself as that person. So when I first introduced myself to another hiker as Fitty Shrimp, it was really a strange feeling, but after that, it was pretty normal, just like everything else on the trail. I got out of college at the regular get out of college age and went to go get the traditional job and a better job, and sometimes you lose jobs and you get a different job to take the place of that job. And then, 25 or 30 years later, you realize you really haven't lived. Last year in 2014, I embarked on my first thru hike. It was on the Appalachian Trail. One of the members of our group discovered some food that a hiker had left behind. The one that we selected was the shrimp and rice special. So it was a disaster and we ended up throwing it out. But there was another camper up there with us who told us that we should become the Highway Shrimp Gang. But the only way we could make it cool is if we turned it into like a gangsta rap group. So we all had to take on rapper names with a shrimpy twist. So at the time I was 50 years old, and so it became natural for me to become Fitty Shrimp.
My trail name is Marathon, and I got that on the Appalachian Trail. I got into town and they were having a half marathon the next morning, and I talked to the race director and I'm like, hey, you're a thru hiker, you can race for free. So I did that. So Marathon, it stuck.
My name is Spaceman Spiff. It's from Calvin and Hobbes. It's a character, alter ego of the main character. It's when he's in class, falling asleep, daydreaming, he imagines himself being Spaceman Spiff, traveling the universe, fighting aliens, exploring new planets.
My name is Stumbling Norwegian, and they used to just call me Norwegian. And out drinking with friends. Got up in the morning after staying up till, I don't know, probably 4 in the morning, and got up at like 7 and went hiking. And I was stumbling up the trail, so they just started calling me Stumbling Norwegian.
And I'm Honeybee, and I got my trail name on the PCT in 2011. And Big Bear was filling up my little jar full of honey that I would carry with me on the trail, and they just looked at that and they said, oh, I bet you made that yourself too, didn't you? And happened that my parents had beehives, and so I said, well, actually, it was from my parents' beehive that, I helped extract the honey from. So then they named me Honeybee after that. There we go.
Oh. Think about it.
Yeah. Thank you. You have pretty earrings.
I'm Spice Rack. So, look at you, huh? I'm Spice Rack, and I got my name because I thought it would be a great idea to carry around a mini spice rack with me on the trail at first, which did not make it beyond a few hundred miles, but the name stuck. So.
And I'm Bluebird because I accidentally bought everything blue without realizing. Had blue clothes, blue pack,
Blue shoes.
A whole bit, blue shoes.
The trail name's Freebird. It fits too. It's like one of my ideals in life, and thru hiking is to be as free as possible. Like no schedules, no plans. Throw the plans out the window. Just wing it, and that's when the real trail magic happens. I have very few ties. I don't have a car anymore. I'm house free, and I've been living this life on the trail for many years now, over 10 years basically, almost year round. I've hiked the PCT 3 times, I've hiked the AT 3 times, I've hiked the Continental Divide, I've hiked the length in New Zealand, it's called the Te Aroa. I've hiked the Florida Trail. I'm not a Florida Trail thru hiker technically since I skipped all the road walking. And I've hiked the Hayduke Trail, just did that this spring. Tons of other smaller trails. The John Muir Trail twice, the Long Trail twice, Kalalau Trail about 50 times on Kauai. It's my favorite short trail. I live in Hawaii. The Chilkoot Pass Trail in Alaska, a bunch of hiking in Alaska as well. And one of my favorite short distance hikes, the Lost Coast Trail in California, which is similar to this, coastal walk.
Since Glacier, I've already seen incredible diversity in these mountains. The Flathead National Forest is more subtle, gentle rippling mountains, all tree-covered and similar to its neighbor. The two-story cabin on top of Stull Peak is just a tiny speck from across the valley. I scramble up the ridgeline, racing the sunset and the approaching rain clouds, and arrive just in time. In the morning, I found some new air vents in my hat, courtesy of the football-sized rats of Stull Peak Cabin.
Three of those is like off.
With one national park and a national forest behind us, exhaustion is becoming a constant. When we get to Yak, nobody makes a move all day, so before we know it, we had taken our first 0 day.
When you get to town, you eat a lot, and you go to establishments and you loiter a lot. Hardcore loitering in town.
From a physical perspective, it's just really hard to be prepared when you start a thru hike. 3 to 4 weeks into a thru hike, though, things just start changing and your body adapts to what you're putting it through. My body would say, okay, we're going to do this, but the first thing we're going to do is lose 20 pounds. So get ready for that.
Our hitch out of Yak drops us off about 10 miles too far. Marathon and Spaceman decide to try and hitch back, while Fitty Shrimp, Matt, and I think we can intersect the trail from here with a couple logging roads.
This is a trail as much as it's gonna be.
Then, the P&T isn't where it's supposed to be, and we get our first real taste of being lost.
Where Fitty at?
Get on the trail!
I would say that on this trip, 70% of the time I've been somewhere between either slightly confused or completely lost. And that's just been a part of this adventure.
The trail conditions of the AT were so consistent, but on the PNT you've got, a section of perfect trail, and you might have that for like a mile, and then you just, where did this trail go?
This, we felt, would be more of a challenge, not only physically but mentally as well, especially after doing the PCT. And that's kind of what we wanted, something that it wouldn't just be, one of us following the other person and just mindlessly walking.
Yeah, this trail is all about choosing your own route.
We choose to take the Northwest Peak alternate route, where we will start our first planned bushwhack. Only this time, there will be no brush. Just 100-mile views in every direction. Fitty and I will descend from the peak on sketchy loose rock. Then we'll traverse the ridgeline between the next two peaks. At times, the ridge will come to a knife edge, with 1,000-foot drops on either side. Fitty is afraid of heights, so he's not looking forward to this nearly as much as I am. Spaceman and Marathon signed the logbook in the cabin, so at least we know they are somewhere ahead of us. Still no sign of Matt, though.
traveling on a through hike type trail, it's not just a single file line of a bunch of people. Everybody is doing their own thing, and you just meet up whenever you meet up. It could be today, it could be tomorrow. There's been times when I was separated from the others for a week or longer, a couple of different occasions. And that's okay. That's a different kind of hike then. You just are out doing your own thing for a few days.
When I was hiking alone, it was wake up, go back to sleep for 30 minutes. Wake up again. Should I have my oatmeal cold or hot this morning?
We tried to be out of camp by 8 at the latest, which would end up being more closer to 8:30.
And try to get in, I don't know, at least 20 miles.
2 hours is about all I can do without having to eat something, or I don't know, just sit for a minute.
No, I don't have any routine at all. And I don't plan the day, so I just walk and see what happens.
We knew our goal that night, and it was rare that we didn't meet it. If we didn't meet it, it was because we chose not to, like, for a good way. Like, we found a spot that made more sense to camp, or looked more fun, or decided to push ourselves further because we felt fine or whatever, but, you know, we usually stuck to our plan.
Fiddy and I find the rest of the group waiting for us in Bonner's Ferry. But no one else feels like leaving town in the rain, so we wait. I'd rather move at my own pace, but I'll have to sacrifice a little bit in order to hike with my new friends. I'm starting to realize that moving slow isn't such a bad thing anyway. When we do leave, a lady named Lynn offers us a ride to the trailhead. Along the way, she even gives a full historical tour of the area along the Kootenai River.
We got it!
See ya!
There have been whispers among the hikers lately about the infamous bushwhack, and today we will have to confront it. In Idaho's underrated Selkirk Mountains, we are to traverse the mountainside behind Upper Ball Lake for half a mile. Then we'll descend from the ridge to Lion's Head Creek. From there, our only directions will be to follow the river for 4 miles, or until the end of a trail appears.
This trail is just so young. I mean, that's just part of the trail's coming of age, I guess you should say. You know, you've got to deal with some bullshit before it gets, you know, well established.
Hardest day yet, for the least amount of miles. Occasionally, I'd find a game trail to follow, but most of the time was spent fighting through huckleberry bushes, or just standing there, trying to decide between a bad and a worse route.
When we got to the top of the ridge, there was thunder in the distance, and it started to rain.
I think it might be time to get off of this ridge.
We found what we thought would be the best route down the mountain into a creek valley.
Everybody's saying, where Fiddy at?
Where Fiddy at?
In the bush!
And we stopped for lunch down there. Just a terrible mess of a place to try to eat lunch.
It's not my kind of hike, I've decided. I like the more traditional, you know,
With the trail.
trail, yeah.
2 different occasions we were caught in hailstorms that afternoon. I was really getting cold and somewhat hypothermic, so I was able to find a giant rock the size of a house covered with moss, and I declared this Fiddy rock, and this is where I was going to camp tonight. And then Marathon agreed that it would be a good idea to stop.
You know, sometimes you end up having to deal with a gnarly bushwhack, and sometimes the best way to deal with that is to set up camp and deal with that shit in the morning, which is what we did exactly.
Because that area was so tough, and because, we all mentioned it as the bushwhack, it kind of was a unifying experience for all of us.
Cold last night. It dropped down into the 30s. Today, it's 85 as I climb 3,400 feet to the top of Lookout Mountain. I lost Fiddy and Marathon in the bushwhack, but by now I trust that everyone can handle themselves. I'll see them when I see them. According to my watch, it has been 25 days since I left Glacier, but the life I took a break from at home feels like it is years in the past. Out here, every day feels like a week, because each moment is filled to the brim with something new. I entered the third and final state of the P&T tonight. So much has happened already. It's hard to believe that 75% of the trail is still ahead of me. In Washington. One of the few famous trail angels on the P&T lives in Medellin Falls, and a bubble of hikers are already in town when I arrive. Mary Kate treats all 11 thru hikers in town to a gourmet hiker feed of steak and potatoes.
I wasn't expecting no trail angels, and they just kept on popping up out of the woodwork. And it was like, oh, just come stay at our place. And I was like, okay, cool.
The trail community in the bigger trails is kind of stale anyway, for the most part. You do have a wonderful community, but it's kind of like take a number, sign up for the shower. But this trail community is completely fresh and new.
And those experiences with meeting all these great people along the way, that's a part of the overall adventure.
Oh yeah, a thru hike can definitely restore your faith in humanity.
Yes.
Knowing that there's a ton of helpful, nice, wonderful people out there. It's not all the death and destruction you hear on the news all day long.
Leaving Northport, we entered the cattle country of eastern Washington. Ahead, there are 30 miles of road walking before we'll even see a trail.
You'd hike 6 miles to your campsite on a road, and then knowing the next day you still got another, say 4 miles of road walking to do before you reach a dirt road that you would still walk on for another 6 miles to reach possibly a trailhead. You think it's a trail, but it's probably just an overgrown dirt road that has become trail. So that I think was also mentally tough.
I think all the road walking though made me appreciate trails more than I did before hiking this trail, and just all the work that it goes into making a trail and maintaining a trail, and I think I have a new appreciation for what goes into making a trail.
The road is much harder on my body than the trail, but the exhaustion has had some interesting side effects. My mind is less cluttered as I walk. Slow steps, each one reminding me of how tired my legs are, but no step is worse than the last. My breathing is rhythmic. increasing and decreasing with the hills. This is the meditative walking I imagined, but I didn't know it would take total exhaustion to find it. Water has been hard to find lately, in the high desert country of the Okanogan National Forest. This morning, I drank my last few gulps, knowing that there wouldn't even be a chance to fill up for the next 5 miles. Temperatures rise above 100 degrees, but Oroville, Washington is just 15 miles away, and soon enough, I'll be sipping on a milkshake. The longest official section on the P&T is next, the Pasayten Wilderness. Leaving the halfway point of Oroville, we won't have another chance to resupply for 160 miles. The guidebook says we won't even see a road for a week. My pack is full to the brim with 9 days of food, but now that we are out of cattle country, I have a good feeling about what's ahead. Deep into this long section, the P&T merges with another epic trail, the PCT. We are to follow it southbound for 15 miles, for what is supposed to be some of the best views on either trail. The guidebook describes the Pasayten Wilderness as, if you have good weather, the Pasayten will be epic. If you don't, it will still be epic. Just not in a good way.
Yeah, you can't control everything that's going to happen.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that's a really powerful part of the trail because you do have to let go, and what you need will be provided in one way or another. And just trusting that.
Understanding the unknown is not something that's scary. That it's accepting and that we're resilient people and you could figure out what to do. It was absolutely gorgeous, beautiful blue sky weather, and noticed fire smoke. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, you know, because the only fire I knew of at the time was the Wolverine fire, which was like 40,000 plus acre fire at that time. But it was, the fire smoke was coming from the wrong direction. And I'm like, what's going on? Fire smoke was starting to fill into valleys, and then you drop down and start heading west off of the PCT back onto the BNT, and instantly right into fire smoke. And it was like that the rest of the way for another day and a half, I think it was, or maybe 2 days of hiking. You don't know if you're walking right into a fire even, you know, and luckily we weren't.
Yeah, when we got to Ross Lake, there was the whole New Hammond fire happening. So the whole resort was closed down. People were leaving.
Yeah, there were 8 total.
Wow.
8 fires total. They called it the Upper Skagit Complex.
Although Ross Lake was pretty sweet, all the guests had to evacuate because of the fire by order of the Park Service. The owner was like, well, we have empty cabins and you guys are here anyway, you can just make yourself at home in one of our cabins. So we had this amazing resort all to ourselves, and on top of that, when the guests were evacuated, they left lots and lots of good food that we made use of.
The hiker hunger is in full force now. I can't eat enough, and my energy is suffering. It's been 12 days since Oroville, and our next town stop is still 3 days away. The guidebook says that there is a small camp store at the Swift Creek campground, which I'm banking on because I barely have 2 days of food left at this rate.
I almost just walked straight into that. There's a trail behind him.
I'm starting to notice a rhythm to this hike. There are highs and lows. It's not always up to you when those ups and downs come, but it's important to keep moving. There is no camp store at the Swift Creek campground, so I'll be surviving off donations for the next 24 hours.
I'm much more present or in the moment, appreciating right here, right now, than I used to be. I used to, I was always planning for the future, worrying about the future, or ruminating over the past, and never actually living day by day. So when people now ask me, when I'm backpacking on one of these trails, they say, well, where do you live? And I say, right here, right now. This is where I live. And then they're like, come on, really? I'm like, no, really. Right here, right now.
For me, it's like every time you near town and are in town and leave town, there's sort of, your like humanity, civilization thing sensor goes up, like cascades up when you're exciting town, and then you're like up there with the root beer and the cell service and everything, and then back down, as you're confronting the trail again. And once, on that back down, when you're getting back into the trail, it's like you fall back into the rhythm of the trail. And for me, that means like going to bed when it's dark out and getting up when it's light out, and not feeling this like chemical need to check my cell phone that you feel in town.
Well, I think what they're talking about is that the clutter in their mind starts to dissipate after a few weeks, and then they fall into a rhythm or a flow of walking the trail where there's less effort involved. You've got your trail legs, you're in shape, and you just kind of flow along.
I always felt some kind of like deep relief when we were back out again and just hiking, and we didn't have all these different distractions and things we could do, because the only thing we had to do was just walk.
The Pasayten and the North Cascades back-to-back took a lot out of us, and we could use a break in the upcoming terrain. Since we are in concrete already, we decided to take the Rails to Trails alternate into Anacortes. The next 2 weeks will be a polar opposite from the previous two. This alternate and the Puget Sound area is the most populated part of the trail, and we will have the convenience of town almost every day. The P&T is always fluctuating from one extreme to the next, and sometimes very rapidly. From bushwhack to perfect trail, high desert to lush rainforest, and now wilderness to metropolis.
We can get so set in our ways for such a long time that it's like to do anything else is strange and even taboo sometimes. But on the trail, it's nothing but change. Everything's changing constantly. The weather, your location, your gear's doing weird stuff, your food's, there and gone.
And for me, it was a simplicity of life for those few months. You didn't have everything that you have to think about when you're working and renting an apartment or a house. To have months, of every day you're out seeing beautiful scenery. For me, it's a way to really just recharge and reset.
It's kind of humbling, and like I said, one of the beauties of thru hiking is you've got to lose self-consciousness. Well, we all do, and it's just like how vain the world is, and like wearing fancy clothes and trying to look, trendy or fashionable. It's kind of pathetic.
It's in focus when you come off the trail, how much that dominates our culture. And when we're standing, like looking like hobos, needing a ride, and some high school kid drives by and says, "Get a job," it's funny because you're like, I just like quit like a pretty cool job in DC where we were like influencing policy to come out here and like hike 1,000 miles to where I'm standing right now, and this person driving by has no idea of that. And it's almost relieving or liberating to like not need to tell that person all that stuff, and to just have that sense of confidence in yourself.
Anyone can go out and do this. It's just making that decision to go hike.
Shut up. You can do it. You can do it. You just don't feel like putting the effort into planning and quitting your shitty job. Anybody can be one. If you can walk, you can do it.
A black sheepdog quietly greets us near a farm. He quickly assumes the role as pack leader and shows us the way for the next 5 miles. When we reach Deception Pass Bridge, we decide it's time to call the number on his collar. The veterinarian transfers us to local police, who transfer us to animal control, who just don't want to help.
Yeah, he got bored at home. He's ready for an adventure. Bad timing.
We feed him what we can that night, and he camps with us. The next morning, a park ranger finally takes him off our hands. But now that he's gone, we kinda miss him. Brand new trail angels have given us a place to stay for the past 3 nights in a row, including one couple that we met way back in Glacier on our first night of the hike. When they discovered that the P&T practically ran through their backyard in Oak Harbor, they offered us home brew and beds to sleep in, if we made it that far. Next stop is Port Townsend, after a quick ferry ride across the Puget Sound. My body is well rested, and my hiker hunger has been quenched. Now, I'm looking forward to getting back into the wilderness. The route I plan to take through the Olympics will be just as long as the Pasayten Wilderness. With another 160-mile section ahead, I didn't know that simply getting there would be the hardest part.
And it's major freaking highways, no shoulder. From those highways, you don't directly go to Snow Creek Road. I spent maybe an hour and a half sitting on the track in my GPS, walking back and forth on this road. Where is this trail? Like, there's just nothing.
But it turned out to be nothing.
Yeah.
Absolute nothing.
We're looking for a trail that probably doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Thorns wrapped around me and stinging nettles, and I can't even move. I probably should have a job at home, where I can make money and support myself and do normal things, and here I am. This is like, is this really a good life decision for me to even be out here? And I never had any moments like that on the AT.
I have no choice but to set up camp in the thorns. The next morning, the bushwhack only continues to thicken. At the end of a very long 9-mile day, I find a rocky overlook on Mount Zion. The stress of the day melts away as the sun sets on the leading edge of the Olympic mountain range. I haven't seen a soul for 3 days now. Ego virtually dissolves when there are no other egos to feed it. I'm only thinking about myself when my aching body complains about the miles. Otherwise, my thoughts are distant and free-flowing. Fourth day of rain in a row, with no sign of it letting up. For the past couple days, I have been descending out of the last mountain range on the PNT. When the fog finally breaks, the mountains are gone. Just rolling hills from here to the Pacific Ocean. But first, a much-needed stop in the town of Forks, Washington. With Marathon still a couple days behind, Fiddy and I set out to cover the last 18 miles to the ocean. From then on, we'll be walking northwest up the Pacific coast to the westernmost point of the contiguous United States, Cape Halava. I wasn't sure how I'd feel when I saw the ocean, but it's a powerful feeling, a massive sense of accomplishment, and very surreal because this new landscape is almost mythical. Only 33 miles of beach between us and the western terminus.
It's not all about finishing. It's the people you meet along the way. It's your experiences, your shared experiences amongst your friends and fellow thru hikers.
Just totally different scenery.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, slow hiking at times.
Real slow hiking.
But it was kind of good it forced us to slow down and
Yeah.
enjoy our last few days on the trail.
An unfathomable coincidence manifests on the last night of this unfathomable hike. The combination of a lunar eclipse, harvest moon, and supermoon rises from the east. 4 miles short of the end, a perfect bluff rises above the trees to watch it from. So we decide to draw the hike out for one more day.
the last little chunk kind of sucked because there was a lot of decomposing seaweed and dead fish, and it smelled terrible.
Yeah, kind of a scummy trail end.
We got to Cape Lava and we weren't even sure if we were there. There's no sign saying that we're done.
Just like the rest of the P&T, we're not really sure we're in the right spot, but this seems like the end.
I think it'd be nice though if they erected some sort of monument.
Yeah.
Or a sign,
or at least a sign.
Something.
P&T emblem like somewhere.
Yeah, even just an emblem up on a tree or something.
You know, that says you're done.
Yeah. Or you're just beginning.
Or you're just beginning, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
After the initial woohoo of finishing, we're like, okay, well, now what do we do?
Yeah, it's weird most of all because you've accomplished a huge thing, but it's an inevitable beginning of a transition that, if it's not unknown, it's at least a little awkward.
Kind of bittersweet, very, very bittersweet. It's like just one of those things where you got to move on either way. You know, you can't live out there forever.
Ended up being really cool to hike such a young trail, I think. Just to see it in a different stage and imagine, hiking the PCT back in the 70s or when it was a young trail and kind of thinking, might have been similar to this in places. And we'll probably go hike it again in 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Hike your own hike means just that, you don't owe anybody else an explanation for what you're doing. If you want to skip a 10-mile stretch of dangerous highway walking, then do it. If you want to be able to look back at the end and say, I walked every single step, from here to here, that's great too. Hike your own hike.
Reaching the terminus of my first thru hike was surprisingly insignificant. I had already experienced the extremes of this trail. Cape Lava just meant that it was over, and I wasn't quite sure how to feel about that yet. I got to experience this trail at a unique time in its life, and everyone seems to agree that this year was a breakout year for the PNT. Somewhere between 35 and 70 hikers might not seem like a lot, but it's at least doubled since last year. As the PNT grows, the increase in recognition will inevitably solidify its route into a single red line on the map. Every year, more and more of the guesswork will be eliminated, and with it, a little bit of the adventure. I'm excited to see the PNT mature in the future, but I'm grateful that I got to experience it while it's still untamed. 1,200 miles, 87 days, July 4th through September 28th. I have lived more between those dates than I have in the past many years.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS, T-Dress.